Hey folks, you probably heard the Sony A9 has dropped. No doubt you've heard a bunch of videos already running through the spec sheet, so I'm not going to do that again. Instead, I'm just going to pull out the few specs that I think are most important and a couple of what ifs. Hey folks, before we jump into this, do jump on over to my website, mattgranger.com. You can sign up for my mailing list and I'll send you a free copy of my guide to improving your portraiture. Now, I'm a little bit late on releasing this video. I'm currently in Tokyo with my assistant Chris, and we're filming with the A7R2 and the A7S2, actually, as well as an FS5, and putting them through their paces, and it's really brought home how they're really specific cameras for different tasks. My theory is that you probably, when people are considering buying something, they actually watch like a dozen videos on the same topic. Let me know as a comment, how many videos have you watched before watching this one on the A9? I think I'm pretty safe in not running through the full spec sheet. You've probably heard all of it. I'll just pick out the things that are of interest to me because I need to actually get back to doing. Okay, before we even get into the top line specs, nobody splits the audience of photographers like Sony does. There's Sony fans who are just so diehard they don't see any problems. More of the fans who love what they get from it and put up with the compromises. And then a whole army of people who just hate it and call anyone who uses Sony a fanboy. I don't want to be either of those things, but in the past I have talked about some of the deficiencies in the Sony system. And I have to say, imagine you're a Sony user who's been using the R2 or the S2 or the A7, and you've had complaints, and a lot of your friends do too, and then they bring out a camera that actually addresses a lot of them. It's not something that you hear or see a lot in the market anymore. So I think Sony users have a right to feel pretty happy that they've been listened to on this announcement. Really quick top line, 24 megapixel, 20 frames per second without blackout. That's the big showstopper, that this will shoot 20 frames per second raw with full tracking, and because they don't have to flip a mirror around, they're able to continually track rather than tracking and then for a millisecond it is blocked off and then they have to find the subject again and reacquire it. They can just continually track it. That could be huge for people shooting moving subjects like sports or wildlife. 693 watt AF point, I mean, it's ridiculous. I've never heard of something that high. And it's got over 90% coverage. Fantastic. Having a whole bunch of points clumped right in the middle is really useless for tracking. So that coverage sounds great. 693 is an impressive number for marketing to throw around. Have to test it. Have no idea how it's actually going to perform. 2 SD cards. Finally, you know, a lot of people, including myself, were shocked when the D7500 from Nikon didn't have 2. So many people saying, oh, no one will ever use a camera, you know, seriously with only 1 card. Well, every Sony A user until now has been. Now there's going to be the option because you'll have 2. The biggest bugbear that Sony users, I think, have endured, and the thing that non-Sony users just love to rib them about, is this thing. Their battery life. The batteries are tiny, but that's a result of the cameras being tiny. Now, I personally don't see a huge benefit in the size and weight. I like a big beefy camera, so I've always wanted a bigger battery in these guys. But, you know, seeing that there are things like the A99 Mark II on the market that have staggering performance in a bigger form factor, but they don't sell nearly as well, and they have a bigger native lens mount range, it does make you wonder, well, you have to assume that a lot of people who are shooting mirrorless really do want the smaller form factor, so small batteries for that have been important. So the new battery is 2.2 times the capacity, but, you know, don't just start jumping for joy just yet. That obviously the A9 is a lot more battery hungry. For example, the A7R was rated to 290 shots on CEPA, but a lot of people would get more than that. The new battery being 2.2 times bigger, it's still rated to less than 500. And as we're going to get to, if you're going to compete with things like the D5 and the 1DX, less than 500 shots per battery is still really low. Another thing, this only comes with 1 battery in the box. I believe in North America, the older ones came with 2. If you want an external charger, that costs extra. If you want a 2-bay charger with batteries, it's like $400. So it's got the same size rear viewfinder, but it's twice the brightness, and it's super high res. That could be great. We found using that the other Sony ones in bright light are just dogs to actually work with. You can't see any detail. I really like that they've added a focus mode dial underneath the top dial, so you can go from manual to autofocus, single, continuous, DMF. It's always been something you had to dig into the menus, and it was really annoying if you're going between stills and video, so great to see that. Does have an optional grip that'll take 2 batteries in it kind of vertically. Video, they've stripped the video capabilities out of this. It will do 4K, 24, 25, and 30 frames. The 24 has a bit of a crop though. It's all doing 6K downsampling to 4K, which you're most likely going to get more rolling shutter with that. We'll have to test that though. There's no more picture profiles, no S-Log 2 or 3 or Cine 4. They're just gone. You're stuck with, the portrait and vivid modes now. But that brings me to one of the points I wanted to make. Sony Alpha series are still young. They're in their infancy. This is something that's Fuji with their GFX and X-T2 are facing too, and Hasselblad with their new medium format. When you bring out new camera bodies, then you have to bring out lenses and accessories and all of that stuff. Sony was a victim of its own success in that their bodies just got so popular, and then they were rightly criticized that there was a lack of native lenses. So that's still going to be the case, but they're clearly marking it out now. A9 is for sports and pros. A7R is high res. The A7S is clearly aimed at video, and this is not. They've taken the video specs out. I have to say, I'm amazed that this can do 20 frames per second in RAW at 24 megapixel onto SD cards. So for people asking, I've already had messages, do you think there's going to be an A9R coming in 3 months' time? If it does, I think it's going to have to change in form factor to accommodate XQDs, because you couldn't get 20 frames per second on a higher res sensor onto SD cards with the current tech that we have right now. Is this now truly a pro option? I'm not going to bash on Sony for this. So many people, when they see Sony, will say, yeah, they just did 99 things right, but what about this one that you missed? You guys suck. They've made big improvements here. This looks really, really like a huge leap forward. $4,500, it's $1,500 or $2,000 cheaper than the Canon and Nikon flagship sports cameras, but you have those compromises. You don't have a gigantic battery, you don't have that ruggedness. It looks like the grip using bigger lenses like the new 100 to 400 is too tight, your fingers can barely fit in there. That's also a problem, and if you want giant lenses and a tiny body, it's going to be unbalanced. You just have to accept that. A couple of things that I did think are really good to hear. Well, first of all, the rumor is, or someone reported from the show, they're going to bring out pro service centers in California and New York. That's a great step in the right direction. I've criticized them in the past for the service that I received in Australia. I just hope that this is going to be the start of Sony servicing their own stuff rather than sending it to third-party manufacturers where everyone in the game has the incentive to keep prices as low as possible rather than getting service as high as possible. The biggest one that I think is now, is this going to be a true pro option, is still the lack of long lenses. If this is going to be a sports camera or a wildlife camera, that we need native large lenses, 200, 300, 400 mil primes that you could get for the older Sonys that they just don't have in this mount yet. So, is it now a system that can compete with Canon and Nikon as an overall system? No, but come on, that's been around for 100 years just about. When we're talking about Sony, this is a big step forward. They're listening to their customers, they're putting in things that they want, and this is gonna sell like crazy, no doubt. Yes, the links that I have in the caption are affiliate links. If you're planning on pre-ordering one or buying one, it does help me out if you click one. It doesn't cost you any more. But I'm not saying that this is going to be an amazing camera because I haven't touched it yet. All I've seen is what's online and the spec sheet. But it does look like a giant step in the right direction for Sony, and for me, I'm really pleased. To answer your questions now, no, I don't intend on buying one for sports. My D5 is just perfect, and I have all the lenses for it. So that's a big consideration if you are going to jump ship. Just getting a few extra frames per second, but having to replace everything and relearn everything is still a big and daunting proposition. Anyway, time to get back into Tokyo. We've got some work to do. Let me know your thoughts. Are you interested in the A9? We'll see you soon.